Good afternoon and good morning to everyone that's joined us from overseas. It's great to welcome you to our July LinkedIn Live. I was just saying to Rick, I feel like today might be a little bit stressful because got builders, dogs, animals. I'm sweltering. I've got a fan on. I think most of Europe have had the longest, or maybe it's just the UK, but I don't know. It's very hot, Rick, and I think we're all suffering slightly. But anyway, so welcome. And we're talking about scaling a borderless workforce with flexible payroll options. I'm going to bring this down because most of you know Rick. Hopefully, a lot of you join us on a regular basis. But for those of you that don't know Rick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So Rick Hamill, founder and CEO of Globally. Globally is a global workforce management platform that focuses on streamlining how companies manage their global teams. Our niche is really looking at how we can streamline payroll from building our own gross net engine in 127 countries, excuse me. And we're very much focusing leveraging AI to do so. Our goal here is really to help you through that process. I have been in HR and payroll for, should I say, date myself, over 20 years. And so I'm not here to think about necessarily globally per se, but really talk about my own experience as an HR practitioner, payroll practitioner, and also realize how we can help you guys through some of the things that we've been through.
Thank you so much, Rick. I was just making sure, I was having a few technical issues there. I was just making sure that we had actually gone live, which we have. So one thing I started to panic inside, thinking, oh my God, have we gone live? But one thing which I always love to find out is where everyone is dialing in from today. So if you want to let us know, that'd be fantastic. And I think we do normally get people from States, Canada, Philippines, UK, Europe. So it'll be great to see where you're from. And of course, if you do have any questions for Rick, please feel free to ask them because we do like it when it becomes interactive. And everyone's been very quiet. We do have people online, but it seems very quiet. Anyway, Rick, shall we start then?
Let's get started.
So when organisations first start expanding internationally, what are the biggest payroll mistakes you see people make?
I think the first one is kind of the entity setup structure. They think that just because they set up an entity in a particular country that they're ready to do payroll. And that's actually not true. A lot of time there's additional registrations, for example, pensions or social security registrations, or even how you have to register the employee in country. So I think really just understanding that setting up an entity is not the end all. There are certain steps that you have to take to ensure that you are compliant in that particular country and ready to actually process payroll. I think looking at a payroll checklist is one of the best practices and understanding what needs to be implemented. I think when we think payroll, it's implementation for a reason. Working with the right payroll provider, I think, is also important as well. Someone that really understands the local presence and what those requirements are in that country, I think is key. But really just understanding that the biggest mistake is just because I set up an entity doesn't mean I'm ready to process payroll. You're on mute, Melanie.
We haven't. I don't think we've ever actually said that on a LinkedIn Live. I was doing it because the builders had started, and I think I've got a bit of feedback, so hopefully not. And also, getting an entity is quite a difficult thing to set up in some countries, isn't it? It's not an easy thing to do.
I think there's. I'll give a funny story. When I was running payroll years and years ago as the head of HR. I remember going to that wonderful tool called Google. And I said, how do I pay employees throughout Europe? And Google told me, which we know this is not correct, but Google told me that if you set up one entity in Europe, I can pay all my employees no matter what country they're in. And they recommended a country. Now, we know that technically speaking, the European Union have the ability to work and get paid in different countries, but is that really compliant? No. But I was like, oh, I'll just set up one entity before. And I said, this is how it's going to work. And that was not true. So going through that process of actually having to set up entities in different countries and realizing that entity setup is not just the actual structure of the entity, but the registration for those employees. I then found out about pension requirements and things like that. I realized that even though in certain countries you also have to register in different provinces or different parts of those countries where you have employees as well. So there was a lot more complexity that came into just entity registration and being ready to actually employ employees in those countries and employ to pay those employees.
Yeah. So, well, I've actually got a question here, and I'm actually thinking of changing it slightly. So the question is, what point does a company need to stop thinking locally and start building a truly global payroll strategy? But should you always think locally?
I think you have to think about it from multiple ways. I think what is your overall strategy as an organization, I think is one. But typically what we found was once a country expands into their first country and they have an opportunity to see the success of remote work or hiring talent in different countries, or looking at what they call, low-cost locations where they want to be more cost-effective, where they're actually outsourcing their talent, they tend to expand faster in other regions as well. A study I did before was typically after the first 6 months of going global in expansion, typically you're already in your second or third country, depending on the type of solutions that you're leveraging. And so, yes, I think if you're going to start to go global, I think it's important to really think about an overall strategy and how to actually support your global operations. I think, we talk about 2020. 2020 was the year of just trying to hire talent, where we're seeing more and more companies now focus on how do I manage that talent? How do I make sure I'm compliant in those particular countries? 2020, we were just trying to get people hired, right? Because of what was going on in COVID and remote work and trying to be more cost effective because of what was going on in the market. Where today we're seeing more and more organizations go, okay, now I've got the talent. How do I actually maintain the talent and make sure I do it correctly? Because there's been a lot of fines and issues that have come up and how companies were managing it. Because look, I'll use myself as an example. Going into a new country really early on in my career, I assumed everyone operated like the US. Now, that's very American of me, but that's what I actually thought when I first went into the market, right? And so I'm not the only one. I've spoken to many prospects and companies and clients who said, hey, I thought the same thing. If I'm in the UK, I thought that's how they operated in Spain. I didn't know what Baja was. What is that? What do you mean by that? And those are things that I think that you have to really take the time to understand and start to think about your overall global strategy when you go into your first country.
Yeah, that it's a story that I tell very often, and I'm sorry if this person's ever listening, but somebody was told that they had their company had recruited a salesperson in China, and then she asked me whether or not she could use if she could pay them on her Sage Payroll software. So that was at the beginning of just before COVID, where workforce has started to change. And I suppose with that workforce changing, it does have a massive impact. And actually, one of the things that I suppose we hear about is where there are fines issued in certain countries because they're just not aware. And then obviously that has a big impact from payroll to your finance director, finance controller, with the impact of so many fines and not being aware.
Yeah, I think that when you think about payroll, I think a lot of times, especially new organizations or companies who go into new countries, they don't know what they don't know. And so many times where they go, I didn't realize once I hit a threshold in India that I have to start offering PF, Provident Fund. I didn't realize that I was subject to certain things because what's a CBA? What's a collective bargaining agreement? What does that mean? Or what do you mean there's a premium on vacation? I already have a negotiated salary with an employee. What does that mean when they take vacation? I have to pay a premium on that because of what the rules and regulations of those countries are. And when they don't abide by those rules because they don't know what they don't know, there's things that come up. Either employees, there's some issues because employees believe that they should know this if they're employing those employees in those particular countries, or the country says, hey, you didn't file this tax. We realize that you have this many employees, you're not compliant. And I think the biggest thing that we find with fines is companies just don't have the right partners. They don't have the right technology. They don't have the right know-how. I remember, I always say this on these calls, I remember when payroll was Excel files. I remember when I was, uploading to a SharePoint my payroll file to get processed, and then a couple of days later, I was getting that back. The world has changed, and the world has become more digital. And with the digital world, governments can review and audit you a lot easier. On the flip side of that, then what are we doing as organizations to ensure companies can actually have that same level of visibility to what actually needs to happen? A good example of that is the new Payroll rules that are happening in Belgium, and that's going to roll out in France and next year in Germany. And what is that actually? What the implications of that to payroll will be? We're already having conversations with some of our clients and prospects about what does that actually mean for them and how that actually is going to, adjustments and payments and tax payments, and to avoid penalties, because those tax payments are due within days, not weeks like they're used to from a payroll perspective. And having the right solution that gives you that flexibility, but also gives you the visibility, I think is really important. So making sure that you're having that checklist and validating that information, I think is really important. And real good technology will allow you to have that, to be more proactive versus reactive in global payroll.
Because it's crazy, isn't it? If you think about people that process payrolls, that is their main country, and then you're dealing with global payrolls that you're not necessarily aware of. It's like at the moment everyone's struggling in Australia with the legislation that's they're really I think it's brought the community together, but at the same time there's a lot of stressed people. I heard one story where the whole payroll department just walked out on Friday because they just weren't prepared. I mean, I don't think that happens very often, but obviously they got to the stress level of the highest amount of stress. So I can understand. So when you're doing a global payroll, it doesn't matter how large or small it is, you really do need to have the right partner to work with. And the legislation is changing all the time, isn't it, in different countries?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, what you just said. I think the one thing that we have to think about first off is governments don't change regulations within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. We've seen it happen once in a while, especially during COVID, but they don't. There's a lot of time to actually understand that. And so that communication feed, that knowledge sharing, I think it's really important in understanding how that's going to impact and how do you train your clients behind that. I think that's important. But the second piece of that as well is, when you have that level of stress that they don't know what's going on, I think that tells me there's a transformation issue that's happened, that's failed. And I think that there's ways that companies, either through their own internal processes or through their partners that they work with, can really help mitigate that by being more proactive in kind of communication and what that looks like. In Australia, for example, the biggest thing was that superannuation actually changed to payments have to be done a lot faster. Well, we know you can issue payments. We know that you can push those payments. It's just changing what the status quo was and how do you actually implement that into a policy. That didn't happen overnight. In Australia, companies knew that. And if you think about it from a global payroll perspective, you had people knew what we needed to do and how we actually communicate and support our client based on that. If it wasn't properly communicated, that's the problem.
Yeah, and also this is going off the tangent, so I apologise. But also with that, they implemented a law that the payroll individual or payroll manager, payroll leader, or the financial controller is legally responsible as well. So maybe the impact of having that new legislation plus the changes, like a big impact, like you're right, things are announced beforehand, so there should be time, but maybe there's a big impact. Anyway, sorry, we'll go. I went off topic.
So here's the thing. I think when we talk about how you can create flexible payroll options, I always get back to AI. And the way that we look at AI here globally is we've tied into a lot of these tax authorities, government websites, and we're pulling that information and we're synthesizing that information, and then we're creating a way that we can explain it to our customers, not just from a legislation perspective, but also showing it through a visual perspective through payroll. And so I think it's really important when we say flexible options, it's how do you actually get that information and then show and make an organization know, or help them understand what's going to actually, the implications behind that as well, and when that actually is going to go into effect. A lot of times I hear a lot of companies go, we heard about this went into place last week, or this is going to go into place in the future. I think sometimes when we look at clients and client sizes, it's the priority of how we communicate that. To your point, especially in the remote world that we live, organizations may have 10,000 employees in one country, or they may have 5. And that priority for that 5-person group versus the 10,000 group obviously is going to be a priority for the business. And they're going to look at a higher risk for the larger population. That's not a good thing. That's not a good way to kind of think about it. Working with the right partner, having the right technology, it shouldn't matter the size of your organization. It really should matter how they're actually informing you on that. And there's some good technology out there that can do that. I look at how we leverage AI to do that, but there's some really good technology out there that can help you with that and be proactive, which creates flexibility for you to make decisions and implement change within the organization.
So I know we've spoken about this before, but one of the things when you're looking at a provider and you are going into new territories, one of the things that we've heard from our membership, from the GPA perspective, is that they're just not, the hand isn't held when they're going into a new territory, or the provider has gone, well, you need to find that out yourself, or you need to you need to find this information yourself. We can't help you. Or if there's something new going on, you need to do this yourself. And I always find that really bizarre, because I think surely, or am I being naive? Surely that should be something that providers should be helping with, especially if there's new legislation, or if you are going into a new territory, surely they should be working in those territories. So should be able to provide assistance when you are having new employees in that area.
Well, I hope I'm going to say something radical, and I hope that I don't have a bullseye on my back after this. But I think that, Melanie, that then shows the infrastructure that organization may have. There's a lot of global payroll providers out there that have a really beautiful UI for customers and employees, but the back end of their platform is completely manual. And I think that's where there's a challenge, because they don't want to take on the liability of keeping you up to date and informed when they're really very manual in the back end, and they don't have a mechanism where they can pull that information and validate that information in real time. And so I understand from that perspective, and I also understand from the customer perspective, is if I'm paying you a fee or a solution for the solution, it's a solution that you're also helping me. You're helping me to make sure I'm staying compliant in that particular country, because I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the know-it-all. I don't know what I don't know in that particular country. And I think that that's kind of what we think about flexible payroll solutions. You have the archaic, the solutions that are legacy systems that have been around for many, many years. And then you have solutions that are newer and are kind of thinking outside the box and how they're supporting their customer base. And I think it's really important. Payroll is really hard sometimes to change, because you're used to a certain way. As long as everyone gets paid, it's fine. We'll deal with the nuances, because we've always dealt with the nuances. But I think it's important that payroll really think about it in a different way. Think about it in a way that says, how can I be more strategic to a business? How do I actually all this administrative work that I'm doing, all this research I'm doing, all these lawyers or accountants I'm paying because my payroll provider is not doing it. Think about those dollars that you're investing and how much money you can save, and then reinvest those dollars into the business if you have the right technology. And I think it's really important to look at how technology can create flexibility for you, in leveraging things like AI, automation, or even just, even connectivity, like if you're integrating with systems like Workday or SAP or HiBob or Oracle, things like that, how they can actually synthesize and make your jobs a little bit easier.
So again, one of the topics that we've spoken a lot about within the GPA is that a lot of organizations grow through acquisitions, or they grow organically. How should payroll really adapt to both approaches?
Well, I think acquisition, is really important, because it's bringing that data together. There are things like TPay that you have to apply to, when you're changing over employers through an acquisition. There has to be technology and processes to ensure that you can do that. You can either do that through an HCM or your payroll, but I think that there's ways that you can validate that information and consolidate that pretty simplistically. I think when you're thinking about expanding the business, I think that may be a little bit different, and then how you're going into that approach. But acquisitions, I think, are really simplistic in regards to from a payroll perspective, because you can validate what they were paid, what they're not being paid, bring over the year to dates. If you're acquiring the entire business, if you're not acquiring the entire business, but you're acquiring just a headcount, then that's even easier, because then you can just transfer over and still comply with TPay from a European perspective. But technology can do that. Like, again, when I hear, and by the way, I hear this all the time, when I still hear payroll individuals who are using Excel files to process payroll. I'm like, wow, we were doing that in the early 2000s. And so, there's been a lot of movement with technology. The world has changed. How are you now leveraging technology to make your jobs easier, not harder? The saying, work smarter, not harder. And I think technology can do that for you.
And I know our audience is a little bit quiet. Sometimes it can be people are putting comments in, and sometimes it's not. But I am really keen. I am really keen on the whole Excel thing, because I just think, are we ever actually going to move away from Excel? I know I can't remember which country. Apologies, I can't remember which country I was in just recently. That sounds so glamorous, doesn't it? But it's not. But we had a symposium, and I asked about Excel, and people still are using Excel. Are we going to move away from Excel, or is this going to be our comfort blanket?
I think Excel. I think a lot of systems and processes are built off Excel. Let's be honest. I think there are people who are still reporting payroll in Excel versus actually leveraging it to do bulk uploads and bulk changes. But a lot of platforms are based on leveraging CSV files or Excel files to be able to operate. So I don't see us getting away from it completely. I think we've just been very dependent on the entire Microsoft suite since it came out. And we use it every single day in business. I mean, think about it, even before email, now we have email. That's all we leverage it now, right? Word, Excel, I think it's going to happen. So payroll, I think we've gotten very used to it. How it's leveraged, I think, can be different, but I think systems are based on using Excel. Even our own platform, Excel uploads are very common within our data processes as well.
So it's not going. Okay. So one of the questions that or I get asked quite often really, is there one global payroll solution? So maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of the consultants I work with, global consultants, were like, look, you need to look at it regionally rather than one global platform fits all. But has that changed, especially with AI coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased because that's what we built. So I like to preface I'm a little biased.
Biased way.
Yeah, I'm a little biased there. But I think that companies are trying to figure out how to improve the employee experience and also not create a lot of different processes and procedures in how they actually manage payroll or manage their teams. They're looking at ways to streamline that through a single vendor. At least the customers and prospects we've spoken to and analysts that we've worked with, we've sat down, and the biggest thing is I've got a process for the UK, I've got a different process for China, I've got a different process for South Africa, and the US is a different process. And companies are looking at ways that they can really streamline that as much as possible and have a really good experience, but also not lose the local knowledge, which I think is really important to stay compliant in. And so I think that there's an opportunity there to do that. I think we're seeing more and more companies go, I don't want to work with 15 different vendors in 15 different countries. I need a single provider. And then also when you think about the payroll process, the global payroll process on average is roughly about 8 days to process payroll, where our focus here globally is to do it under 8 hours. And so giving that much time back to customers, I think is so important, because then you don't have to worry about payroll. You go in, just like you do locally, you go in, you submit your hours, you get your cash requirements, and you fund your payroll, and it's done. That same experience is what many companies are looking for in their day-to-day for global payroll, because they don't want, I just had a call the other day with someone, they say, our current provider takes, I think, 8 days, and I have no idea why it takes that long to do payroll. I can do it in my country, I can do it in 5 minutes. They want to be able to do that a lot faster. They want to be able to not focus on that. They want to be, again, they don't want payroll to be administrative. They want it to be strategic in the organization. And so giving that time back is, I think, really important. And that single solution can create a streamlined kind of process to how you process payroll and report payroll, and actually how you fund payroll, and actually how you actually get information out from a reporting perspective. I think we're seeing more and more of that requirement every single day.
And do you think that because technology is evolving, is that a capability that organizations should be looking at today? So if they're looking for a new provider, do you think that's one of the key things that they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think for multiple reasons. One, scale and volume. You get volume discounting. So if you've got multiple countries in multiple countries, you can get global pricing, so you can streamline that pricing across the globe. The second thing is you can actually streamline where your information is. We call it system of record. So if you're using a payroll system across the globe and it's your system of record, this is where it's at. And even if you're integrating with tools like I mentioned earlier, like a Workday, like a HiBob, like a SAP or Oracle, you then have your HR system of record connected to your global system of record, and they sync. And I think that's really powerful for organizations when they think about, getting information and really understanding where they're at. They can then take that information and look at compensation reporting. They can look at that information and see how they're actually being compared. You want to talk about the Transparency Act. You have one system that actually can report that for you versus trying to cobble together multiple different platforms, multiple different countries, and figure out what that looks like. So I think there's a lot of advantages there, and companies I think are done working with multiple providers. They want to have one solution.
And I think talking about the Transparency Act, so what we've seen, if people disagree, please put in the comment box. But maybe it hasn't been at the top of payroll leaders or payroll's to-do list, or they're aware of it. They know they've got to do it. But obviously, there are a lot. I think last time we met up, there was only like 4 countries that had actually hit the deadline, and there's still a lot of countries still going through the process. But I feel like next year that's going to be a crazy time because the EU will be expecting this data. And I feel like that data is really going to come from the payroll leadership or the payroll team. So having the software or the systems in place now is key.
This is where you test it. This is where you validate it. It reminds me of the frenzy from GDPR, if you remember that years ago. And everyone kind of waited to the last minute, and then they were rushing to figure out what that meant and how to do it compliantly. I think that's the sentiment you're going to see on the Transparency Act as well. But working with systems that can actually help you with that and actually implement that to make sure you're fully compliant right off the bat is out of box solution for you. I think it's really important. Again, it gets back to not having a hodgepodge information. I also say when you're using multiple payroll systems and you're looking to integrate that into a single HR system of record, you're going to run into data issues in many cases because it's synced in many different ways. And so how one system syncs, another system syncs can be different. So we just see more and more companies who said, I'm working with so many different providers and they're syncing into my Workday, for example, but it's not the same data, or I've got missing information because they don't all have the same information. Accordingly, that's where they're going to have troubles, and they may not be compliant in regards to some of these new regulations coming out. So again, having that single source of payroll, I think is really important to make sure that you focus on compliance and help you focus on compliance.
And I know we've mentioned AI a lot today, but just sort of like finishing up on the tech side of things, what do you think the biggest opportunities are for AI? Is it again reporting?
Yeah, I mean, AI, let's be very clear. This is not a new thing. AI has been around for quite some time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of capabilities that AI can bring. And if you look at working with cloud, if you think about if you're working with ChatGPT or any other AI tools, you're probably using it in your day-to-day life anyway. And you're probably, in some cases, using it for some of your work opportunities. These things are going to make your jobs a little bit easier. I think AI can be brought in to really expand reporting for you, which I think is great, but it also can allow you to skip steps or improve your processes versus having to do 15 steps, maybe get it down to 5 by leveraging AI. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity that AI is not being used for today. This is a conversation we have every single day here at Globally is, can we leverage AI for this? Can we synthesize this? How can we report this? How can we make this easier for the customer base? And so I think, AI is going to make your jobs a little bit easier. And when you think about it from a payroll, especially an HR perspective, I think it's just going to revolutionize the industry even further. And again, I keep getting back to this. I think it's going to allow payroll to be even more strategic in the conversation than just being the payroll department or the administrative department.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it will make payroll a lot more strategic. So a slightly negative question, maybe, but a positive as well. Turn it around. What warning signs tell you that a company's payroll model is no longer fit for its international operations?
A few. So one of the ones that I would probably see is, are employees getting paid on time? Are you having to run multiple off cycles? If you have to run off cycles, don't forget that you're paying for those off cycles every single time. Are you having to fund payroll so early in advance within your organization that it doesn't make sense? Are you do employees question tax calculations? Do they have questions about how benefits are being applied to their payroll? If you're hearing that quite often, then something's not right. If they have questions about local regulations, if you have to constantly correct something in the platform, or if something's not adhering to your collective bargaining agreements or your union agreements, those are things that you would have to ask yourself, does this make sense? And the last thing I would say is, when you're looking at your data, are you comfortable and confident yourself that what's being produced is accurate? If you're questioning yourself, then this is not the right solution for you.
Yeah, actually, we haven't talked about data a lot, because you've got the compliance that keeps people awake, and then you've got the reliability of data. And then I suppose AI is going to help with both of those to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'll get a sneak peek into kind of how we're thinking about it. When we bring clients over, we actually audit their data, and we validate it to our own calculations, and we spot what we think there's anomalies and what those anomalies are, and then we get an AI report of what that looks like through a mock payroll as well. And so then we can say, hey, does this make sense? And it may be a rounding issue. Okay, that may be one thing. Another thing may be, how things were calculated from maternity leave or paternity leave, or if someone was on medical leave, like a Baja in Spain. These are things that we are validating when we're bringing clients over, and then we're calling it a medical report. Basically, that you're giving them and say, this is what we need to fix on your first pay cycle with you to make sure that you're compliant. I think AI, if you ask me if we could do that 10 years ago, no. That was all done through an audited through Excel, and it took a lot of time to actually implement those payrolls. But because we're able to do that in our system, and clients actually can do it very much self-service, AI has allowed us to make things a lot more simplistic and payroll ready in that particular country, the way that we're onboarding our clients now. So I think AI has been a huge asset to one, compliance, but two, making sure that it's reading data that you can leverage and make sure you're doing things compliantly. And I say that because if it's 5 employees in a particular country, that's different. But if you're auditing 20,000 employees in the country, and leveraging AI just makes you get it done a lot faster, and it can put that information right in front of you. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it is amazing. I mean, we are lucky that we're, I know, Rick, you're younger than me, but at least, not younger than me, but at least we're a generation where we know what it used to be like, and we can appreciate what's happening now. Because, I tell the guys that I used to use the fax machine and have to run to the fax machine and all of this sort of stuff. I know that was even before your time, Rick. Yeah, it was an LP, so I think we are lucky. But just talking about some of the misconceptions within a business, what do you think misconceptions are about global payroll expansion? Do you think the C-suite thinks it's really easy and they just press a button and just add some data, or do you think there's more to it than that?
So I'm gonna answer the question, but I'm gonna also say, why shouldn't the C-suite think that? There should be technology that you can do it that simplistically. So there should be an opportunity to do that, and it should be that simplistic. But to your point, it's not that easy. I remember when years ago when I was head of global payroll for an organization, and the CEO walks in my office and says, we just hired a bunch of people in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Japan. Make sure they get paid at the end of the month. And I'm like, what? So I do think I think the biggest misconception that it's just payroll. You're just paying people. Just figure out a way to get them paid. And a good payroll leader is going to make sure that they do it compliantly. They want to make sure that there's a really good employee experience. Employees know. We use this notion all the time: is if you mess up an employee's payroll twice, they're already going to start looking. So HR and payroll are always looking at how they can actually make sure there's a really good employee experience, the employees pay is good, and that it's compliant. Because an employee knows at the end of the day, if you don't do the right tax calculations or withholdings or reporting, it's going to impact them and their families at the end of the year. And so payroll is not just, hey, get them paid. Payroll professionals are looking at how to make sure they do it right. And so yeah, I think the biggest issue is that the C-suite may think that, hey, why can't you just get it done? Just get them paid. Also, on the flip side of that, I think employees don't think it's also easy too. They think like, hey, you're just supposed to make sure I get a paycheck, a direct deposit monthly or biweekly or whatever my pay cycle is. And they think that it should just be done in a couple clicks, and I don't understand why my pay is messed up. So I think it's more than just the C-suite. I think the employee base is that as well, and it's the HR and payroll professionals in organizations that we're musicians here, or magicians here. We make everything look very easy, but it's really making sure it's done correctly, and the notions that everyone thinks it's done very easily.
And so regarding the skills for the future for payroll professionals and payroll leaders, what do you think people need to be learning now? What skill do you think people need?
I highly recommend AI classes. Take a couple of AI courses, start using AI in your day to day. It's really, AI can be addictive as well.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of started to notice that, but start to learn how that it can make your jobs a little bit easier. I caveat that by saying before you implement any AI within any organization, understand what you're getting yourself into, and do not don't submit any PI data in AI without actually having your IT team look at it or validate that or approve that. But look at how you can actually leverage AI, how you can make your job a little bit easier, and see how much time you get back with it. And then look at how you can have when you look at them at time and investment dollars that you're putting into that, how your organization can really support that and help scale that for you within your organization. I think it's really important. But then also when you're looking for payroll technology and payroll platforms, asking how they're leveraging AI, making sure that they're compliant within the rules and regulations, I mean, the human in the loop process, but see how they're leveraging AI and how that's going to make your job a little bit easier. And sometimes you're going to see a lot of the legacy companies say, we've got an AI chatbot, but look at platforms that actually leverage AI as the foundation of their platform. I think that's really important.
So again, a conversation that I've been having quite a lot with people, and it's going back to a conversation that I used to have about 7 years ago, when we talked about tech a lot, is actually the customer service side as well. Like, so I've had a few members approach me where they've worried about the customer service side. How can you, I mean, if you're going to a new provider, how do you work that side out? Because it's great seeing all the tech, but if there's a problem, you want to be able to get in touch with somebody quickly, and that sometimes can be an issue.
No, when we talk about flexible payroll systems, you also have to think about the service delivery behind that as well. And I think that's important. A couple questions you can ask is when you review your SLAs should outline what's going to be AI responsive and what's going to be a human response as well, and how they can actually escalate and support you from that process. You also want to understand what their escalation process is. If AI, the one thing I used to hate is you hit one and you keep saying, customer success, and you have to repeat it 1,000 times. Ask them to kind of walk you through how this works. How do we make sure that I can connect with someone if I really don't want to go through an AI process? Can they turn their AI off? Then that's another question that comes up as well. And if they say, look, I don't want to be supported by AI, I don't mind the system operating with AI, but I don't want to be supported by AI. The question you would ask is, can they turn it off? So the flexibility that you need in a technology provider, I think is really important, and how they can actually work with you as an organization as a whole.
As a partnership.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're coming to an end to today's session. But I just want to ask you, we were on the last LinkedIn Live, we were asked to run a demo because we had a lot of people asking about AI and just wanted to see a little bit about globally and what you guys do. So we've now rescheduled it to the 20th of August. So I'll put the link in here and in the previous session so people can actually join us. So how's it going at Globally?
Good. I will say, look, I am very excited about what we've built here. The feedback that I keep getting from the marketplace has been, we are the future of global payroll. And we've had a lot of demo. We've run over quite a few clients, and really people love what they're getting, which I think is really important. Where I think that we are constantly talking about improvement. I think I've created a lot of white hair in my organization because I'm always asking for process improvements and how we can support. Our clients are so important to us, that feedback from our clients. We actually have expanded our client advocacy programs where clients are able to see our roadmap and be part of those conversations and help draft and kind of make us think a little bit differently about our product, which I think is really important. That has been probably the best thing that we've done, and getting them involved with that. And then just, my foundation, Melanie, this is to help people. And so I've been in HR, I've been in payroll, and I just think there's just better ways to do it. I've created other industries before. I've very much been focused on direct and less third party as much as possible, and really making sure customers get the time back to be more strategic in their organizations and focus on growing and doing what they do best. And so that's what we're focused here at Globally. That's the conversation we're always having. Like I said, I probably create some headaches on my side within our organization, but it's like we have to constantly think about our customer experience. We want to make sure we're improving our UI all the time. We want to make sure we're improving process and procedures. We have releases every other week, and just new things that we're releasing. And there's some really amazing things that are coming out that we're excited to be demoing to the GPA membership team, membership as a whole, excuse me. But we are really excited about what we're doing. And I have to say, by the way, thank you for GPA's feedback as well, and helping us build something that was really amazing.
No problem. It's exciting to see something from new building, and I do think that the global payroll industry as a whole is looking for a change. So I think it's exciting times. It's not so exciting times for everyone with the legislation changes, but there's definitely exciting times moving forward in the technology space. So if you do want to get in touch with Rick, honestly, you can message Rick on LinkedIn. Or get in touch with Rick through his Globally email. I'll put this in the comment section. So if you do have any questions, even if you're not a GPA member, or if you're just somebody from the payroll community that just wants to reach out and ask Rick, honestly, he does answer. So he's not just one of those guys that says, I'll answer any question. He does actually answer questions. So maybe I'm giving you too much now. Maybe too many people will be questioning you. Anyway.
No, I love to help people, Melanie. I think, look, we all are in payroll, right? We all understand. We've all been through ups and downs in payroll. We've all had some cuts and bruises. You don't see the white in my beard because I dye it, but it's there based on that experience. I think that if I can help with my own mistakes, my own failures that I've learned of being a payroll professional, I love to help that, because I rather someone step over a hole that I fell into before.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to help in any means. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've had many people reach out, and some of them have become clients. Some of them just became friends. And those are things I really am passionate about. So feel free, anyone that has any questions, even if it's just trying to evaluate your current provider, I'm happy to have those conversations.
Fabulous. Okay, well, really nice to see you again today, Rick, and we'll see you definitely on the 20th of August. So look forward to that. See you later, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.